I wish all of you a very pleasant Tuesday here in this season of Easter. As you well know, as you have maybe been paying a little bit of attention, I have centered a lot of my reflections on the first reading of each and every day, the reading that we proclaim at Mass. That being the Acts of the Apostles. What I love about the Easter season is that it does spend a considerable amount of time reflecting on the Acts of the Apostles, the early church, that church which emerged and evolved following the resurrection of Jesus. I find it fascinating. Hopefully, you find it fascinating in a little bit of a way because of the fact that it really depicts not only the early church, it certainly depicts our church today. And especially as we are in a crisis, namely this global healthcare crisis, it is all the more important to listen to what God says to us in the Acts of the Apostles, as maybe we can take away something that will be useful, something that will be grace filled. Therefore, today I want to pray again the Acts of the Apostles. In those days, some Jews from Antioch and Iconium arrived and won over the crowds. They stoned Paul and dragged him out of the city, supposing that he was dead. But when the disciples gathered around him, he got up and entered the city. On the following day, he left with Barnabas for Derbe. After they had proclaimed the good news to that city and made a considerable number of disciples, they returned to Lystra and to Iconium and to Antioch. They strengthened the spirits of the disciples and exhorted them to persevere in the faith, saying, "It is necessary for us to undergo many hardships to enter the kingdom of God." They appointed presbyters for them in each church, and with prayer and fasting commended them to the Lord in whom they had put their faith. Then they traveled through Pisidia and reached Pamphylia. After proclaiming the word at Perga, they went down to Attalia. From there, they sailed to Antioch, where they had been commended to the grace of God for the work they had now accomplished. And when they arrived, they called the church together and reported what God had done with them and how he had opened the door of faith to the Gentiles. Then they spent no little time with the disciples. What I find especially hopeful today, especially as we see so much of the not so good in our world today, is what we hear proclaimed at the very end of the passage. And when they arrived, they called the church together and reported what God had done with them and how he had opened the door of faith to the Gentiles. In the midst of all of their hardship, in the midst of all of their persecution, the early church was a hopeful church. And as we hear, especially Paul today, speak after considerable persecution, physical and emotional and even spiritual, he proclaimed what God had done for him and what had been God done for the early church. It is good for us in the midst of this pandemic to remember to the wonderful ways that God has intervened in our world and in each of our lives. We, as stewards of all of God's blessings and gifts, recount the blessings and gifts. And we are truly grateful. We say thank you. Maybe that is what we can do each and every day. Maybe what we can do each and every day is consider what God has done for us. And as we say thank you, what we have received, maybe we can in some way make present to another. Is it not true then that it is in that way that we instill hope? And as we instill hope, we look forward to new life here on this planet. May God keep you and bless you all the days of your life.